Hi. Finally, I am at the last row of the lattice. I'm very excited about that. So it's gonna have the copper yarn in there. So I wanted to show that to you. When I added it up above, it was an afterthought. I hadn't planned it, but it just kept on coming to me that there should be copper there between uh, the designs. So now I know to put the copper there. So I'm going to not embroider it like I did the first time, and so I'll weave it in. But there is someone mowing their lawn outside, so um, it's kind of noisy, and I don't know when they start or when they stop, and it's hard to plan any weaving and recording. So yesterday I overlaid my reading stories over my weaving, and it worked. So I'm going to plan on doing that today too because of the lawnmower. Um, so I'm planning on reading some of the stories that Swanton gathered up here in Masset in regards to the copper. And I'll look for interesting stories. There's several stories about copper and how we received it and how we use it. But so I'll try to find some interesting ones and I'll overlay it over my weaving. But right now I want you to show you how I entered that weaving. So right here is where I entered the copper. I didn't do it over here because I didn't want that copper to run through this way. So what I did was I entered like I had already entered the blue here and then added the black. And then I had two blue and two black, and then picked one pair up and wove and left this. I left this pair waiting. So there's one pair of weavers that are coming all the way here. And then when I got here, I entered the copper and black, which is a separate two pairs. And again, there is a pair that I'm going to leave behind. So, so I'm picking up the top pairs here, and I'm working with that copper wire embroidery thread there. So the two blue and black ones, I'm going to be using back and forth in this area while I weave the upcoming designs, and their pairs will end here. Okay, so that's pretty much what I'll be doing. And so I'm hoping that you'll enjoy the stories and watch my fingers as I put that copper thread through the design. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read you a story from John Swanton's Masset Stories. It's number 73, The Copper Salmon. At Bilgewater Town was a man named Gaia. His father's name was Wartalker, and Gaia liked to gamble, and he spent his father's 8 coppers, and he also spent 6 slaves, and his father's property was used up. Then his father was very sad. He said to his son, "Eat medicine, my son, my child." Then he went to eat medicine. He was alone. He wore marten skins, one over the other, and he landed. Then he went up along a small creek running there. He went far up. He went up on top of Mount Lawagadons. Then he began to cut Devil's Club, and when he had cut many short pieces, he put them around himself. This creek's name was Mossy Creek. Then he sat under a cedar shelter. There he put the Devil's Club around himself. Below him ran the creek, and then he pulled out a piece on the right side, and he began to eat its skin. And he ate all the skin off of it, and he placed it below himself. Then he also pulled off the skin of another one, and he began to eat the skin of that one also, and he ate that one, and afterwards he laid it down in the same place. So he's actually skinning the Devil's Club and eating that as medicine. So these stories can get pretty repetitious. So I'm going to skip some of the paragraphs. So I'm going to skip then. Then it was evening, and then he tied the stalks together. He did this in the evening, and when he lay down, he placed them under his head. And in the middle of the night, he was very desirous to defecate. And then he crawled to the woods, and there he began to defecate. And when he had gotten through defecating, he crawled back to lie down, and then he lied down there again. So he does that several times in the middle of the night. He did not, but then he ceased to know where he was. He fainted. After he had lain there for a while, he came to himself, and then he crawled to the place where he had been lying. Then he lay there again, and morning came, and he looked for the things he had defecated. There were nowhere to be seen, but Hilaog grew there. He saw this, and he also pulled this out. And there was a great deal of Hilaog. And he put on his marten skin blankets, and holding the plant in his hand, he crawled to the place where he had laid, and he sat down again in the place where he had been lying. Then he began to eat this Hilaog, and he ate it all. And then evening came, and he lay down again. And in the middle of the second night, he was sick again, and then he again crawled to the place where he had defecated. He did not sleep, and then he continued lying there, and he shut his eyes. His legs too were weak. The stream ran near him, and below him was a sandy spot. And then when he held his eyes closed, he heard something make a noise in the sand. And then he sat up, and when he sat up, he remained sitting. He did not know where it was. Therefore he continued to sit above it, and while he was still sitting there, something moved in the sandy part under him. He was doing this, and it was moving about below him, and then he tried to catch it, and he did not catch it, and when he got tired, he rose and lay down. Then he thought about it. He thought, if I sat in the water, I could catch it. Then while he was lying there, it began moving again, and then he again took off his clothing, and he again went down to it. Then he sat in the water, and he put his hands between his legs to catch it. While he was doing this, it began moving close by, and then he tried to seize it, and he threw it up into the place where he had been lying. It did not have a slippery skin. It was not large. But then he rose and went to the place where he had lain. Then he felt for it. It was very dark, and he found it and took it up. It was very heavy. This was copper. He saw that it was very dark and shone. He thought it was not copper, and while he was holding it, day broke. But then he saw that it was copper, and holding it, he went a short distance away. Then he again saw Hilaog growing, but without putting it into his blanket, he began to eat it. And evening came upon him, and he lay down. And when he lay down, he did not sleep. He held the copper salmon tight, and while he had his eyes shut, he heard people singing underground at midnight. He heard the singing right under his ear, and he learned this song, and he knew the song. From above he got the copper of the supernatural beings. He sat in Mossy Creek. The song was like this. Next morning he started away with the copper, and going down he came out opposite his canoe at the mouth of the stream, While coming down, he had a blanket around it. Then he tried to find a shelter behind the canoe. He looked for a big tree, and he came to a big tree, and then he took old cedar bark off from it. Then there was a great deal, and he also found sticks, and there were many sticks. So he pushed a post into the ground, and further off he put it into another, and cross beams, and he fastened the ends of the rafters to the posts. He did it by means of roots. Then he placed small sticks upon the rafters. He fastened these small sticks also with roots, and he finished laying them. Afterwards he laid cedar bark upon them, and he finished the roof, and he finished the walls. And then he put the copper into the house along with the marten skin blankets. But after that he went to get firewood, and he brought a great deal out near his house. Then he tried to find stones for it. After he looked up about a while, he found a big smooth one. He found several stones, and he took them. And he also took both of the big ones, and he put the two small ones into his armpits. And he went into the house. And he found some soft things were also with them. Oh, he had put green stones into his canoe. His father owned those stones. Now he remembered it, and some soft things were also with them. These were feathers of the Ndakut. So John Swanton didn't really identify what kind of feathers those were. So the stones were dry, being covered with feathers, and he went down to get them. And I believe that these stones were what kept the fire, that it was live sparks, because then he struck them over the soft things, and sparks fell down from them. And when the spark fell upon the soft things, they were kindled. So it sounds like he had a kit, fire-making kit in his canoe, and the green stones were soft, and they they had sparks after they hit that. He lit the fire. He carried firewood into the house. When the fire was burning, he put the copper on it and placed the stones in front of him. All that time he did not drink water, and he took a piece of cedar bark with which to remove the copper. It was hot, so he took hold of it with the piece of cedar bark. Then he cut off one of the fins from the copper salmon. He also cut off another one, and it became cool, so he put it into the fire again, and the copper again got hot. Then he put the piece of cedar bark around it, and he took it out of the fire. Then he cut off the tail, and he cut it apart, and he put it here in the same place. And then he again took it out of the fire, and he cut off one of its side fins, and he also cut off the ones on the opposite side. All that time he did not sleep. Then he again put it into the fire. When it was hot, he took it out of the fire again. He was very much afraid of it getting cold. Again he heated it. Again he took it out of the fire. But then he cut off its dorsal fin. He also cut off another back fin. All that time he laid the fins close by, and again he put the copper into the fire. Again it became warm. When it became warm, he again took it out of the fire. At that time he began to press it very hard. When it became cold, he put it into the fire. When it became warm, he began to press it again. But at that time it became larger, and when the fire began to get cold, he put more fuel into the fire. Then he again put the copper into it. When it became hot, he took it out again, and then he pressed it for a long time. Then when it was thin, it was very soft, and when he pressed it, although it was cold, and he finished it, and it was evening. When it was evening, he lay down. He placed the pieces of copper near where he lay, and then he did not sleep. All that time he was always feeling about with his hands. While he was fumbling about, morning came. When morning came, he put more firewood on. Then he put a big piece of copper into the fire. Then it became very warm, and then he took it out. He stopped putting it into the fire. Then he took another and pressed the edges of that also, and he finished it. And he also put that against the wall. In the same places he also took another one. And when he had finished it, he set it up near the first ones. He took another and pressed the edges of it. and then it was finished. He set it up against the wall near the others. After that, he did the same thing to put to one of the very small ventral fins. He finished it and set it up there also. He also pressed the edges of the other one. As soon as he was finished, he put it in the same place. He finished both, and he pressed both of the hind ones. All that time he put the coppers in the same place, and he also pressed half of the tail. After that he pressed its smaller fin, and he finished all. And he called the small one Copper Child, and the one made of its body he named Big Copper, and he named the next one Mountain Copper. The next one he named Point Copper. The next one he called Peace Copper, and he finished naming them. Then he prepared to go away, and he spent another night there. Next day he put his coppers into the canoe, and he pulled out a long stick from his house, right from under the cedar bark. He did so in order to fasten the coppers to it, and he fastened the coppers with the bark. He got many roots. These are spruce roots, and he fastened the coppers to a beam, and then he started away. He went slowly. He thought, "My father thinks I am dead," for he had been gone many days. He came in front of Swampy Town, and he returned. He saw that some of the things people saw him coming, so they all went down to the beach. They said, "The chief's son who was lost is coming." Then the town people all went outside, and when he came in front of the town, they saw his coppers. Then his fathers went down to get him. At that time, there was a great crowd of people opposite him on shore. They say fathers because it was his natural father as well as his clan people who came to greet him. His father said to his friends, "Take my child, take him up." They put him into the father's house, but they put the coppers into the house first. Then the house was full of people, and they were there to ask how he got the coppers. His throat was dry because he had not drunk fresh water. Then they did not ask him immediately because his voice had not become clear. So they fixed some water that they had put grease into that water, and so that made him able to speak again. So then his father's brother questioned him. He said to him, "Where have you been, my child?" No one spoke because they wanted to hear what he had said. "I went up to the bed of Mossy Stream, and I ate medicine there. After I had eaten and evening had come, I lay down, and next day I again ate medicine. At that time I did not sleep, and when the next evening came, I lay down, and in the middle of the night I heard something moving below me, and I went into the water, and I tried to catch it, and I caught it." And that is part of the story. Thank you for listening. So you might ask how I knew that this was going to be the last row. And so I always look back at the Raven's Tail book, because there was 11 ancient robes that were found around the world by Cheryl Samuel. And when she studied them, she diagrammed them, measured them, and so we have the benefit of all that work that she did around the globe. And so what I know is this style, Raven's Tail, has usually these borders, and then when you get into the middle designing of this style, Raven's Tail, there's usually about 9 horizontal bands that comprise that middle section of this kind of robe. And so I go back to those ones that were analyzed, and then I see the dimensions of the particular bands. So I know that this these bands are on the average 8 centimeters long and deep. So this actually, the band that is the row of the tinna, the copper shields, this one is actually deeper than the lattice, and it doesn't appear that way because on the top and the bottom I have decided to have the thinner, a very thin border. Well, I don't know if it would be called a border, but on the top of the black band and at the bottom of the black band, then I put the blue. So so even though it doesn't look that it's at least 8 centimeters, I know it is. And then this one, I knew when to stop and put the copper, the final copper in that band of designs, because we have the benefit of all that work that was put into the book, The Raven's Tail by Cheryl. And like I said, I know Cheryl. I studied with her and actually wrote a grant with the Washington State Council when I lived there near Seattle, and was awarded this grant so that I could pay Cheryl. And anyway, we talked a lot, and she's a good friend of my mother's and my sister's, a good family friend. And she said, you know, you don't make money with the books, and she didn't actually have any kind of financial aid when it came to her going around to the different countries in Europe and Russia and all the places she found those robes. She went on her own dime. And I think the University of Washington published that book, and of course they helped then. But as far as making any money, she doesn't make too much money, and we all get the good benefit of it. And so I'm very thankful for the generosity of time and expertise that Cheryl Samuel has done for us. And anyway, I use her book all the time, and this is one instance where I would, find out that when to stop, what is the dimensions of those inner horizontal bands that comprise this type of weaving. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you're continuing to spin. Tomorrow I'll start on the blue bands, so you still have time to continue to spin, because you won't be doing the blue bands. That's not required. If you are ahead of the game and you did have warp laying around, then and you've got it hung, you can put the blue bands above the shape that we'll be doing. That's no big deal. So I wish you happy spinning. Thank you. Bye.